It's the 9th day of November 2021. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And we challenge the nuclear industry, which is United Nations. One of their subsidiaries, IAEA, they have many actually, UNSCLEAR, IRPA, IPCC, these are all promoters of nuclear. There's only one way to describe them for a language that everybody knows is you paint a picture of the devil. So it doesn't matter what language you speak, you understand that there's something demonic about that bunch. And we're into day 10 of the Conference of Parties. Protest. Unfortunately, it's nothing like that. It's the complete opposite, right? It's a bunch of school children and toddlers, basically. I'll get to it now. We got a poll tonight. Was George Bush Sr., I'll bring it up, patch it over. Is George Bush Sr. right that United Nations, aka UN, is the New World Order? We got 100% votes, 7 votes. We got a massive 6 people on the show. It's only taken me a decade to get this many people, and that's pretty darn good. Less than 10 years, all the big networks will be negotiating for me soon. It's called censorship, in case that's sarcasm, but that's what happens if you're anti-nuclear in the slightest sense, or UN, they censor the living daylights out of you. Here's George Bush.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Should terrify you. So is George Bush Sr. right that United Nations, aka UN, is the New World Order? I don't know. Have we got any conversation going on here? Colette, James Lucid, it is a big idea, a New World Order. 76 years now of the New World Order. So George Bush is telling the United Nations is the New World Order. They're a corporation with an army that flattened North Korea. They burnt every city in North Korea to the ground. That's what United Nations done for one of their first police actions. Very diplomatic, you ask me. Well, you're not going to listen to us? Well, okay, we'll burn down every city in your country with napalm. 3 million dead. So this is the actual protesters. So instead of the militants, so the New World Order is getting cleverer, that's for sure. They got the kids there now. The kids are very passive. Yeah, I was watching Netflix last night. By the way, this man will sniff your bike seat, your bicycle seat. And other people know him as the head honcho, the current head honcho for IAEA, which is United Nations. And trust me, he's not a good guy. But he has diplomatic immunities with United Nations, so he's out there sniffing. Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation, most carcinogenic thing that exists. What? It's not coal? Not oil? It's not gas? Not carbon? Oh, Dana, it's radioactive fallout. Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. IAEA, which is the bicycle sniffer guy, admitted today there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, that the allowable radiation standards are based on benefit. That's gallows laugh because of the implications, I'll tell you. Not safety. So the standards are based on a healthy 25-year-old male and exposed to a very low dose for a very short period of time. What we're talking about is breathing it in, inhaling it, consuming it, drinking it, eating it. Allowable radiation standards are based on benefits, not on safety. What that means is it's not based on a terrorism event, which is the industry itself, by the way, which is UN. UN is the biggest terrorist organization on the planet. Allowable radiation standards are based on benefits, like bananas or potato chips. So it's one is natural, we're acclimated to through genetics, pure selection. The other one is anthropogenic, man-made. The solar system doesn't produce it, it's man-made. And which means humans have no autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So it's very dangerous for a very long time in a very small amount. Speaking of very dangerous, scientists. How are caterpillars and their poo making climate change worse, says the climate scientist. Demonizing insects for having a shit, for eating and shitting. Bad caterpillar. Like, you got radiation. You're lucky to have a caterpillar, by the way. You got radiation covering the entire planet, killing all the species. And you're out there demonizing them for excrement. The problem is caterpillars eat so many leaves. They eat food. That they reduce the amount of plants there are to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. It's horrible. Dana's making fun of me. Come down. There's nuclear scientists all over the world right now as we speak, by the way. And that's not all. As well as their leaf munching habits, their poo emits carbon dioxide, releasing bacteria once the leaves come out the other end. So it's a double whammy. These are very dangerous people, by the way. And they're in groups, you know. There's a lot of them out there. It's not just this one. There's a lot of these creepy climate scientists out there demonizing insects. Demonizing insects. How are caterpillars and their poos? Well, Dana, they're eating food, crapping it out. There's not enough to go around for the climate, Dana. So one of them's got to go. Lunatics. It'll be your children they're going to talk about next, by the way. Fukushima's children, meanwhile, it's pre-Fukushima. There's no good telling me. I got to show you the clip, I suppose. But I'll show you the clip, then it's not true, right? It's only true if I show you the clip. Dad, just show him the clip.
まさに今そこに元気な人が死んでいくんだよね。
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
And now, drum roll please, it's 350,000 out of a million. But you're worried about carbon, right? They got you well trained. Work at Fukushima plant to go on for 10,000 years. So go down, you know, if you want to help change the world for the better. There's your opportunity. Go down there and never come back. I'm not suggesting you do that, by the way. If you've been here a long time, anytime, you know I'm not suggesting you physically go there. Only nuclear scientists should go there. But I do see people accuse me of suggesting people go down there. They're usually just, they're what they call agent provocateurs. We've had a lot of them over the year from the industry where they ingratiate themselves into the the narrative into the conversation, and they slowly attacked me in increments over time. Obviously, look, I'm for the planet, I'm for the species, I'm for humanity, I'm for existence. Except for nuclear industry, of course. All of them should be dropped into a wood chipper, preferably alive. Work at Fukushima plant to go on for 10,000 years and put that on YouTube so everybody can enjoy it in the future. It's longer than human history. You'll see why. Wait till the people wakes up. I'll sound like I'm just a thumbsucker. God, Dana, yell at them. An insurance person told me people from Fukushima may not be able to get life insurance, especially cancer insurance. The first year was almost 1 million new cancers. Extra cancers compared to the end of the year. 860,000, I think it was. It's coming up, actually. It's better for you to leave Fukushima. Brain neurons don't regenerate. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic. I'm just setting the stage for the rest of the show tonight. This is day 10, right, of the climate protest. We've been covering it. And it's really interesting what I've covered in 9 days of it. And so on day 13 is the last day. They started on Halloween and ended on the 13th. Nah, it couldn't be. Can't be. They're not monsters. Monsters won't do stuff like that, would they? So Tokyo's seen radioactive fallout. I'm just setting the stage. We'll get right into it. 270 times. It'll make sense in a minute. 270 times more contaminated with cesium, which is just one of 1,000 fission products, than global weapons fallout peak. Xenon was 450,000 times above normal levels and persisted for weeks in Washington, D.C. You can't have that without plutonium, uranium, and all the other brutal, nasty species, curb stomping isotopes. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. Oh, by the way, the head of the Tokyo area medical clinic were expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima radiation. Do you know what the United Nations has done about that? Nothing. Zero. They won't even acknowledge it. Yes, United Nations. Yeah, guess what they're up to? More weapons. More weapons. Thyroid cancer risk lasts entire life after radiation. So a Frenchman has decided and refused to declare his support for nuclear power. Congratulations. You'll probably get fired next week for doing that one. Not just cancer, but how low doses of radiation causes heart diseases. Now, see, all of this is important. If you're not familiar with this, bear with me. I'll show you why this is important, because the radioactive fallout from nuclear meltdowns in Japan has covered the entire planet with radioactive fallout, sustained plumes, invisible snowstorms of radiation, pulsing energy at the speed of light, well, just shy of the speed of light, gamma, alpha, neutrons. They, beta, emit pulses every second, each atom, for a million years in many cases, up to 50 feet away on top of that, every second for millions of years. So when you have a snowstorm of it, that's going to kill off the ability of insects and everything to reproduce.
Bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down, bed goes up, bed goes down.
Right. That's the average person. But look, you don't have to be that. You need to understand that we had an event. It's a catastrophic event for the 8 million species, humans being one of them. One of the biggest polluters on the planet is container ships, which we don't, and airplanes, high atmospheric jet rockets into space, and all this nasty deliverance of pollutants into our vulnerable atmospheres. 15 biggest ships created more pollution than all the cars in the world. So 15 biggest ships in the world emit as much pollution as all the automobiles on the planet, and then some, because they're burning. You know how they take fuel, for instance, and they reprocess it into plastic, or process it into plastic, for instance. They do many things with it, right? The stuff left over is so toxic it has to be stored on sites for thousands of years for it to break down naturally. But it doesn't pulse energy every second like nuclear, but it's nasty. Ships have been burning it for decades on the ocean. That's why you see 15 of the biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars in the world. And so when you say they're going to put the price of gas up because all that pollution is killing the planet, no. That's killing the planet, I bet you, because there's 96,000 of them on the ocean at any given time, which is the equivalent of 42 trillion people on the planet every day. So that didn't happen. That didn't happen, right? All you got is the passive children down there. But it wasn't always like that. The climate activists call for end of capitalism, so the media go, that's crazy. Well, capitalism is you can't be held accountable. That's what corporate personhood is, and that's what a corporation... So Mark Zuckerberg can't go to jail and can't get a criminal record, despite the incredible crimes they committed, and got billions of dollars of fines for it, and paid the fines because they don't pay provincial, state, or federal taxes because they're an illegal gray area in the constitutions and Magna Cartas and Bill of Rights around the world, these doctrines that govern your corporate world. So there's no incentive for them not to be evil. So when it gets to nuclear, they got themselves on the stock exchange, so there's no one to hold accountable. There's no incentive not to be criminal. So global warming authors barcode everybody at birth. None of them this year. Climate alarmists call for burning down skeptics' homes. None of them so far this year. Australia professor, global warming deniers should be sentenced to death. None of them this year, thank goodness. But we do got the plague. Attenborough. Humans are plagues. And so when you got all these people coming out and saying that, and Attenborough coming out and saying it, you expect to see this craziness, like militant environmentalists call for executions and decisive ecological warfare. The rhetoric gets crazy, right? Climate change skepticism is sickness, says the professor, that must be treated. And she actually, that's her there, she looks like she needs to be treated a few times. And so when you get to that stage, then it's going to go mainstream. This is what United Nations narrative over the last number of years. This year they got the little kiddies there and everybody's nice and polite. Give us our $132 trillion. We'll leave you alone. And so a couple of years ago, their advertisement on TV before the conference of parties.
Right, kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic. And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
Right, just want to check on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved. Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, it's no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't... Excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back here at Spurs. So many happy memories for me. Anyway, tell me something. What is this 10-10 thing the club is doing?
Well, it means that we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by 10% this year, and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club was the first to sign up.
We've changed the floodlights at White Hart Lane, so they're low energy. Lots of our fans are coming to matches on buses, trains, bikes and stuff, rather than coming by car.
I see. Whatever, I wouldn't do it. It seems like distraction from football to me.
That's just fine, David. You don't have to join in, just ignore it. No pressure. Right, lads, let's do some penalties.
10-10. Hundreds of thousands of people, schools, businesses, hospitals, movie stars, knitting circles, scout troops, presidents and governments, all tackling climate change in more than 40 countries. Care to join us? No pressure. Was that okay?
Sounded great to me. Thanks,
okay.
Gillian.
Happy to help.
So what are you thinking of doing for 10-10 yourself?
What, are you kidding me? I thought that by doing this voiceover, that was my contribution.
Right. No, absolutely. No pressure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Jesus.
Or else. So they were teaching the kids, right, to look at you as
Right,
garbage.
kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant...
So that was a whole bunch of little commercials strung together. That's not just one, right? On TV. So this year, they got a useful idiot little kid. So what they're trying to hide is that. They know what that is. They created, the universities, institutions, governments worldwide created many of these models of Fukushima radioactive fallout only based on venting when they actually melted down. Conference of parties, constipated parties. Military emissions need to be on the agenda. They spent $2 trillion last year, the global military machine. They use the best of everything, by the way. And wherever they show up, there's immediately children goes missing and a child prostitution buildings open up close to the bases. It's everywhere they go, you see that same thing repeating itself. So remember, they're talking about rain enhancement, which is cloud seeding. There it is. So you get clouds like this, and the RF, United Kingdom Royal Air Force, played around with this. They killed 35 people in 1952 with this technique of cloud seeding, right? They also got 3 million children with permanent disabilities today in Vietnam because of cloud seeding with chemtrails, Agent Orange, which is banned worldwide right now. I put this little clip together so you can, because it's hard to tell the story sometimes in a short period. But They knocked every plant off every tree and bush, or every leaf off every tree and bush in the country with chemicals. It was horrific. There's 3 million children a day that are still disfigured. Children constantly being born disfigured in Vietnam today because of this. So when you think about the military footprint, you got to think about stuff like this. What's the footprint of 100 million disabled people and 30 million refugees and blah, 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 blah? The list is unbelievable. What's the footprint of all these Agent Orange? That blew to North America, by the way, and everywhere else. They took the leaves off every tree in the country for 9 years. 9 years of spraying chemicals to a military. Big B-52 bombers, all they done was sprayed Agent Orange, banned worldwide, 24 hours a day. There was always lines and lines and lines of these planes. This is Patrick Clausen from the Washington think tank, the Washington Institute. They're a military industrial machine. They're hand in hand with UN. And so he's going to suggest to you how we got into every war, including the Vietnam War, was by attacking themselves and blaming it on the countries. Crisis initiation.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So it'd be best if somebody else started the war. It'd be best if somebody else starts the war. So you're talking about millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, destroying the pensions and the patents of a country, so he can make a paycheck each week. There'll be none of that. They rolled out all the Greta zombies. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. The Fukushima nuclear plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Not coal, not oil, not gas, not pizzas, not carbon, but Fukushima radioactive fallout threatens mass extinction around the world. And these are different modeled institutions. So when you see studies showing you 450,000 times above normal levels in the United States, and you can see, right, these plume models shows United States and the entire planet being hammered with radioactive fallout. But because in the United States and Canada, coastlines are the first to get hit when it comes across the ocean. It only takes about 3 days for the airborne to come across the ocean. Almost the entire ground level of the northern hemisphere covered in fission product, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. So these plumes are pulsing energy. That's global warming. That's global warming in overdrive. And it's the same thing with the ocean. I had launched research expeditions year after year after year, all the way to Alaska and back to Vancouver, British Columbia. And what we seen was an extinction event, and we got harassed constantly since this. While I was on the ocean, I was under siege the whole time. You can fill the beach up with people. You can fill it all the way up with people. And you're not going to find the species that are missing. The species to your left, you're never going to take those pictures again, all, including Alaska or California. That's what the coastline used to look like. Animals starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Mass starvation events plague the West Coast. Well, this to the right is the West Coast. To the left is what it's supposed to look like. So normally birds can land anywhere to your left and get a feed, right? But Fukushima ended that. Radiation data from Seattle survey may be withheld by the feds for national security purposes. Yeah, because it was 450,000 times background levels and persisted for weeks. These creatures are very vulnerable. They're exposed to the air twice a day for 5 to 6 hours, depending on how deep, far down the tide chain they are. And so when you see 40,000 becquerels of iodine in a single bed of kelp, it's because most of the fallout, not most of it, but a lot of fallout will wash back down to the coastlines. So fallout on those mountains there will also wash down to the coastlines. And this is a tropical rainforest coastline. So there's lots of water to wash it down where these vulnerable, the nursery of the Pacific is to. So I've done these expeditions year after year and been demonized and vilified. I mean, they literally went insane because I was out looking on the coastline. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. This is what they're... So this is what they're leading all the kids away from. They got these very passive, hippie, almost type cheerleaders, not protesters. They're cheerleading the UN. The UN is the military-industrial complex. It's the New World Order, right? And I showed that at the beginning. And that's what George Bush had said. Is George Bush right that the United Nations, also known as UN, is the New World Order? And because I'd have that question, I can't even get 18 people. I can't even get... With 500 new subscribers, I have 500 new subscribers since I started this site. And I can only get, in the last 2 months, I can only get 20 people, 17 people on my show. They haven't got me hid away, do they? Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction. Can you imagine how cowards you got to be to take that job? Your job is to censor Dana Durford. Can you imagine how pathetic you are actually to get that job? What kind of pinhead you got to be to get that particular job? What kind of loser you got to be the person who's out there censoring somebody? Can you imagine? Because they got 10,000 of these lobbyists. That's what they do at YouTube, but they also got 10,000 of them or more at Facebook, and they got warehouses of these people. They're in warehouses and little cubicles. Like Dana said this, you said in the rule book, people can't say it. I'm going to have to censor them again. Concerns rising at Fukushima plant. 16,000 workers have quit. I say they lost that much in censorers in the last couple of years that committed suicide or beat up their pets when they went home. Concern rising at Fukushima plant. 16,000 workers. These are the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. Pregnant women get a free new house if they move back to the nuclear wasteland. That's UN, man. UN runs the nuclear industry for 75 years straight. 13 trillion times more neutrons, plutonium, curium, uranium, fission products than initially estimated. So you got the initial estimate for a nuclear meltdown. Now you got to multiply it by 13 trillion atoms. There's already, just that word alone, 13 trillion atoms released into the environment. That doesn't worry you? Each atom can kill something in increments over time. When you're eating it, drinking it, breathing it constantly, it's much more effective. It's guaranteed to mess you up. Obvious implications for humans Neutron radiation is the most severe and dangerous radiation known to mankind and can travel great distances. Jesus, that can't be good, Dana. Yeah, I know. So they were kettling people in the United Kingdom. That was practice, right? Well, we didn't like the way they were looking at us, so we kettled them. But you're not going to go deal with the nuclear industry for contaminating your loved ones and your friends and your families and the oceans. That's not supposed to be there. So an interview with the father, we're still in the preamble. An interview with the father of global warming. This is the guy who came up with net zero, the father of global warming. The history of the carbon footprint was BP. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign, public relation campaign, of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005. It was designed to make all the issues your fault. Here's another way they're going to bring the carbon footprint down on us. Here's the father of climate change, James Scumbag Hansen. At a congressional testimony on climate change, said NASA was 99% confident that the moon was up there somewhere and that the warming was caused by accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, not a random fluctuation. And Hansen's testimony was pivotal. It was pivotal and an important turning point in history of the global climate change, which you've been bombarded with since 2015 public relation campaign from the United Nations. These campaigns are brutal for the humans. They don't care. They want to saturate the market with the word climate change, and they own the media. So if they don't write that every other sentence, and mark the official beginning of the global warming policy debates. This is absurd, all of it. So it's population control brainwashing is a smash hit, right? It's all about the money today. It's all about the Britain is hosting the Constipated Parties meeting and will again try to set the pace, announcing another lousy $390 million in new funding. All the senior citizens in the countries are freezing to death in the wintertime. They're just throwing money at this pandering, this groveling to this corporation known as United Nations with a deadly agenda to deal with the impact of global warming. Yeah, United Nations. So this is day 10 of this incredible farce. Keeping California's last nuclear plant can save money and climate, says MIT Stanford study. Of course, MIT has been promoting nuclear for 90 years straight, and so has Stanford for its existence. Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. So to show you that picture there, it doesn't really tell you the story. These reactors use 1 million gallons a minute. That's what you see running out, some of it running out there. California's last nuclear power plant, scheduled to close in 2025, could aid the fight against climate change. So everything is based upon climate change, right? That's the new narrative. No matter if you got a flat tire, it was climate change. If you forgot to buy the lottery ticket, it was climate change. The fighting won the support of former U.S. Energy Secretary Stephen Chu, who in a web presentation said countries prematurely shutting down nuclear plants ended up using more fossil fuels instead. The problem with nuclear, of course, is it doesn't matter how good you build them. It doesn't matter how good you build these things. Is the neutron bombardment destroys the integrity of the infrastructure, and so it's very vulnerable to any kind of seismic activity or any adverse conditions, like a tornado or a hurricane or a cyclone or et cetera, et cetera. And that the infrastructure itself is unstable. And because the infrastructure, like the caps on these reactors could weigh 1 million pounds. And so if you got brittle material underneath it, that could collapse it, right? Now, the one problem, this is nuclear industry promoting nuclear, is all you see in there, is you got pumped hydro. I didn't realize it was going to do that. My apologies. You can pump water up a hill with excess energy. There's 500,000 places, natural places on the planet you can do that. It was identified. And you can also have compressed air. And so you're going to pump air underground at low pressure into caverns. And so you can have compressed air and pumped hydro, both of them. And the pumped hydro could be recirculated water. They do that in Britain, actually, in one place, for peak power. And you can actually do all of it with geothermal, with solar, with wind, excess energy you store it with pumped pumped hydro and compressed air storage. This scares the shit out of me. AI technology that is detecting, identifying, and grading radioactive materials. So they're sorting it. And some of it is going to be burnable, or some of it will go into your local landfill, blah, 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 blah. Well, look, if I take low level and put it in with high level, it's high level now. If I take any of that and I lay it somewhere, that's high level. So if I laid fuel, a gram of used fuel in a building, the building now has to be destroyed and stored in a waste repository. And if I take that gram and put it in every house on the planet over the next couple of million years, then every single house on the planet has to be destroyed. If I take a Dixie cup of this stuff, the fuel rods, and bring it into McDonald's, every person in there is dead every 20 minutes till the end of time, for millions of years. It's very dangerous in a very small amount for a very long period of time. So when the reactors blow up and this incredibly insidious, dangerous stuff is still dangerous for millions of years. Now it's in the atomic aerosol version where you can breathe it in. Insects can breathe it in. They're living amongst it all the time, so it becomes sterilized from all the pulsing. The problem with nuclear is it's always splitting the atom. And so it's creating more plumes like this that are heating up the planet. Cold emissions, oil emissions, gas emissions are not going to heat up the planet. And it had a strong earthquake in Japan today. Very strong indeed. So they can make the reactors brittle. They can make... Now, the problem with earthquakes in the nuclear wasteland is the building reactor 4 and reactor 3. So reactor 4 looks like that. Now, they got a cover put over it, but it'll still look like that next year and the year after. It's the same thing with reactor 3. They tore down the top part of it and killed a lot of homeless and destitute and victims of society. But the fuel pools are actually at the top of the buildings. And you can see there's no top to the building of reactor 4. It's completely gone. And whatever's left is not, you're not able to classify what's left as a building. These are nuclear meltdowns now. This is very dangerous in a very small amount. But the media has come out to trick everybody.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading...
And so this has caused a die-off, like I showed you earlier, from the expeditions. And so their job now is to hide it and blame it on coal, oil, gas. But so why would you pretend you're on top of a building that don't exist? and that melted down and lost its inventory. And his inventory has covered the entire planet in radioactive fallout. This is after 19 days. So why would you pretend that that's not happening? A climate solution for Canada: go nuclear even more. This is absurd, by the way. These reactors are old that they got here. They got no repository for any of the nuclear waste for 75 years. For 75 years, is splitting atoms and hemorrhaging it into the environment. And it's going to be a long time before the fuel is ready to go anywhere. That's the problem. They knew this. They hid it away from us. And now we're stuck in this stalemate where we got all this fuel and we still can't put it in a repository because it's still prolifically splitting the atoms. And that's an extermination event on its own. He said the solution is not to ramp up the use of renewables, unreliables he calls them, but to go nuclear even more. Well, first off, last year for renewables, the unreliables, we produced the equivalent of, the world produced the equivalent of 300 nuclear power plants, 1,000 watt power plants, almost. 261 gigawatts is almost 300 nuclear power plants in 12 months without radiating. Like I showed you already, nuclear has already destroyed our planet. Santa Susana, the Mayak nuclear meltdowns, the SL1s, all the ones they hid away from us. So those who argue we absolutely must construct more nuclear plants to beat the climate emergency are clearly just lobbyists and scumbags. And talking to me from the big climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland, was Dr. Chris Kuiper. He said, Ontario, Canada, decarbonized with nuclear energy. France, Sweden, Switzerland. We know we can do this. There is evidence. The main solution that are talked about, wind and solar, they don't have a good track record. They don't have a good track record. Yeah, but so those who argue we absolutely must construct more nuclear plants are scum. They're not willing to have a real conversation on top of it, obviously. Europe is in the middle of an extreme weather event. There is no wind. Have you ever heard tell of that? How's the weather in Europe this year? Well, the damnedest thing. We got no wind. Oh, well, we better get nuclear. These are lunatics, eh? Scientists, nuclear energy is a waste of time. By the way, every nuclear power plant needs two external power supplies. You know, coal, oil, or gas. And it's usually coal, because coal is cheap and makes nuclear competitive and more profit. There is no wind in Europe, folks. Okay, whatever gets you to sleep at night, buddy. What about spent nuclear fuel? He said there's 22 spent nuclear fuel facilities in Ontario. So possibly one in your community already. Their safety record is excellent. The fuel pool is always hemorrhaged. There is no containment around a fuel pool. It's spent reactor cores. They put in water, big water vats, tanks that looks like swimming pools. But they're not water. This is bore-rated, demineralized water. It's very expensive water, trust me. And it's radioactive like mad. So instead of the radioactive fallout inside the building, it's contained mostly in the water. Then the water evaporates each day. They got to fill the pool up constantly all day. The water evaporates. Each liter is trillions of atoms. Remember I showed you earlier about water? And that's into the local communities. Now, normally most fuel pools are stored and nuclear power plants are built in farming country, right? Most you won't see this gas, oil, and coal plants in farming countries, but nuclear, oh hell yeah! Let's put nuclear in farming country. Why did they do that? Well, there's only one reason you would build nuclear power plants in farming country, because you need to get rid of the evidence. And if people eat the evidence, you can't prove jack shit against the nuclear industry, right? You tell me this is not lunatic stuff? You tell me that's not evil. Tell me that's not evil, putting nuclear power plants in farm country. Tell me that's not evil. Because that's actually evil. So when radiation falls out, and this is Fukushima nuclear meltdown, that's global warming. It's covering the planet in a continuous death plume of radiation heating up the planet. Coal, oil, and gas don't make plumes like that. So he said, I don't think it's fair to bring up Chernobyl. Well, what are you talking about? Did you know that 3% of the children exposed to Chernobyl radiation while in the womb were diagnosed as healthy at age 7? So 93% got sick. It was over 600 helicopter pilots died. United Nations, you won't see that at United Nations on Chernobyl. You won't even though Kofi Annan said this on the podium with United Nations in 2000, you still won't see it in the official records or Wikipedia or anywhere else. But 3 million children require permanent treatment because of Chernobyl. Many will die prematurely. So radioactive research reactors, for instance, are very low energy. But what you're seeing is a incredible discrepancy in the male to female, more males than females around nuclear power plants. And so you've seen the same thing on a big scale after Chernobyl. Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximities to nuclear facilities in France. So it's not just Germany, it's also France. Ionizing radiation and human gender proportions at birth. So there's a lot of documentation, trends in human sex odds at birth in Europe after the Chernobyl, in Europe. Thousands of miles away from Chernobyl. All of Europe ended up with more males than females after Chernobyl. They all got poisoned. Prenatal irradiation-induced brain injuries and impairments. There's some kids from Chernobyl in some of the orphanages in Belarus and Ukraine. They don't even have a TV set. The nuclear industry won't even give them a TV set, won't even acknowledge them that they exist. Early infant mortality in West Germany before and after Chernobyl. Effects of the accident of Chernobyl atomic energy plant and the outcome of pregnancy. There's all kinds of orphanages in Belarus and Ukraine full of children with no toys, not even a TV set, not even a radio. Because the nuclear industry is scum. Infant mortalities after Chernobyl. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden after the Chernobyl accident. Dental abnormalities in people living in radionuclide contaminated regions. Down syndrome time clustering in January 1987 in Belarus linked with the Chernobyl accident. This is a Belarus orphanage for children from Chernobyl. Pregnancy outcome in Norway after Chernobyl. And congenital abnormality registry in Belarus after Chernobyl. There's just millions and millions of children brutalized by Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. Chernobyl was a 200-ton reactor. Fukushima's reactors were 800 tons, and there's 5 million pounds in the fuel pool. Pregnancy outcome in Finland after the Chernobyl accident. Fallout from Chernobyl accident, overall cancer in Finland. Pregnancy outcome in Norway. Congenital abnormalities registry in Belarus. I already done that. My apologies. Incidences of legal abortion in Sweden after Chernobyl. Legally induced abortions in Denmark. Birth defects. Abortion rates in Austria after Chernobyl. prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Chernobyl Republic in the Czech Republic after Chernobyl. Chernobyl fallout and prenatal mortalities in England and Wales. They actually closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland. Global implications of Chernobyl. And the human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. The United Nations didn't stop that. They encouraged it because they're the military-industrial complexes. They're the New World Order. Hey, George Bush said it, not me. Don't get cranky at me. I'm not the one who said it. I played the video of the culprit. Climate Fund seeks UN-style diplomatic immunity. Climate Fund. Climate Fund. Climate Fund. Think about that statement. It's going to end up with what? $131 trillion ultimately? As for Fukushima in Japan, two things went wrong. The first was an earthquake they could handle, followed by a tsunami. And due to failure to part what was seen as foreseeable failures of safety protocol, one person died. One person, eh? The death rates actually might give the creeps to some people. Extreme increase of cardiacs. In fact, the next year, in a single community, was 12,700 excess heart attacks in a single month. They didn't blame that on Fukushima, though. All of these mad die-offs, no, they found something else to blame it on. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Because nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. So the World Health Organization already had a high number before children can get iodate tablets. But officials sharply raised radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after a meltdown, 75 times higher than the New World Order subsidy World Health Organization. Infants' deaths also up in BC, Canada after Fukushima. The U.S. study collaborates. Data shows a large spike in deaths out of whole TV, particularly infant mortalities in the 14 weeks following the Fukushima meltdowns. Nuclear Regulatory wants radiation exposure limits 100 times higher than the EPA. The radiation health specialist, after Chernobyl radiation, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium in their diet start to see heart problems. And senior scientists, irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram of gamma. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of the Fukushima girls tested. So one thing we're seeing was women and children, females of all species, were significantly more impacted than males that we can quantify. And so we got to protect the female species on our planet from this death cult, this secret society known as the nuclear industry and the United Nations, which is the head of the lizard itself. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of girls. So once again, 350,000 out of a million, that's what the scale shows, when it used to be 1 to 2 per million. So why are we paying carbon taxes? Because of cars? Exactly. But one massive container ship equals 50 million cars, and that 15 of them produces more pollution than all the cars on all 760 million cars, trucks, motorcycles on the planet. And by wrapping up nuclear capabilities, we take Canada further toward net zero. I showed you the father of net zero at the beginning of the show, right? Just a guy, and the United Nations, just military-industrial complex is what it is, seized up on that, see? Oh, they took the study, and they used that now as a catalyst, as an arbiter, when it's absurd to suggest it could be. Warwickshire, because people buy right into their narrative, oh, they're United Nations. Yeah, they're the military-industrial complex who bombed North Korea into non-existence and have kept them in a cage and poked them with a sharp stick now for 67 years. For 67 years, they got an entire country where they burnt every community to the ground with napalm. It's absurd. The whole story, because when you don't hold them accountable, you end up at the point in life, at some point down the road, you're going to end up like we are now, where United Nations now has taken over the sovereignty of all countries. United Nations, everybody ran to United Nations to see what they got to do now because the coronavirus. By the way, the coronavirus was created to cover up all of these die-offs worldwide. Because they're shipping the food worldwide now with no test whatsoever. So coronavirus is blamed for it all. Nobody dies of heart attacks anymore. Nobody dies of diabetes anymore or car accidents. They're all tested positive for coronavirus. And you're not even allowed to have a conversation. I had one video where I had a conversation about coronavirus. I actually got a strike on my account because of it. They said you're not allowed to debate coronavirus because it's undebatable. It's already asserted. So therefore, you're not allowed to have that conversation. Now we're going to give you a strike on your account. This is absurdness. Makes Nazis look like schoolyard boogies. So don't worry about the cars because these container ships are worse than all the cars on the planet combined. And there's 96,000 of them on the ocean at any given time. The electric trucks are the same thing. You're not going to solve climate change with electric trucks, but you're going to brainwash them with it. 15 of the biggest container ships create more pollution than all the cars in the world. There's 96,000 out there. That's 42 trillion people when you scale it up on the planet every day. L.E. Goulding, Conference of Parties, Constipated Parties 26, has reminded me how great humans can be. She urged her social media followers, her millions of adoring fans that were silly and bought her album, to suck United Nations dick each day. Majority support Trudeau's climate policy pitches. Majority supports. He's done a poll, they claim a random poll in mainstream media. And the majority supports whatever Trudeau. Like Trudeau, his dad used to work for the biggest corporation in France. So John Chrétien, another former Prime Minister of Canada. Oh, so did Paul Martin, another former Prime Minister of Canada. In fact, most former Prime Ministers of Canada in the last 60 years or so worked for the same corporation in France. So did a lot of premiers of Canada. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. And then became Prime Minister of Canada. What a strange coincidence. Rex Murphy, where's the opposition to Trudeau's nonsense? Constipated Party's nonsense. He's home. He went down there, ran his mouth, and ran back to Canada. He's just going to sit his term out now till he's out of office and he'd go retire like his bizarre dad, the incredible sellout. Their legacy is evilness. We're not just somebody to look at. Racial tokenism. Just the Peruvian indigenous people down there. They get no say like everybody else on the planet, right? Hilarious Conference of Parties prank highlights the absurd level of corporate capture at the conference. Sure, all your universities were captured by the nuclear industry a long time ago. All your media has been captured by the military-industrial complex United Nations a long time ago. We don't have any regulators. They've been captured by the industries a long time ago. You're living in the matrix. It's actually really, truly a matrix. So the yes men simply tried to convince the world that it was a fake company in order to expose the absurdity of the net zero narrative. Well, the net zero narrative was... hang on. See, the big question is, can I find my way back? Hang on, here we go, we'll get it. I was once a net zero narrative, just like you. Once upon a net zero narrative. Can't be too far. Did I miss it? Okay, no. Because we already covered it, right? Don't blink or it's gone past yet. I don't know anymore. Oh, there's got to be right there. Net zero. That's the father of net zero right there. Professor Miles Allen, the physicist behind net zero. Hey, there's the father of global warming. There's the father of climate change. And don't forget the brief and frustrating history of carbon footprint. How did we bring your footprint down? Well, we have ways of making your footprint come down. Oh my God, yeah, Boris is still alive. So they got pranked. Boris is going to dash back to the summit. That's right, he's not there. He went there to get the kickbacks to open it up, and then he ran away like the coward does. International Atomic Energy Agency, aka United Nations. In a warming world, how do nuclear scientists help protect water resources? Each reactor boils 1 million gallons a minute. France used 70% of their fresh water goes to nuclear. In fact, each summer, hundreds of senior citizens die because France, during the droughts, France needs all the fresh water for the reactors. They're lunatics, eh? And then they poison the fresh water out the other end. In a warming world, how do nuclear scientists... It's the strangest death cult I've come across. I've come across a lot, but that's... Yeah, I show like 200 or 300 articles each night. Just take your hand and go type it in if you want to find this stuff. Nuclear power should not be considered an effective low-carbon energy source. My day at Conference of Parties 26 is like a never-ending airport terminal. She's a journalist with the BBC. I'll show you another journalist from the BBC known as Rupert Winfield Hayes. Hang on a second. They're all journalists until you look at them. Where's Rupert too? Yeah. Yep, there he goes. Now, Rupert Winfield Hayes is claiming to be on top of reactor 4 to your left. He's from the BBC.
So this is really why we've been brought here. Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion after the tsunami disaster. But down inside this pool behind me here is still a vast amount of nuclear fuel. You can see it down there beneath the water. More than 1,300 fuel rods. Those have got to come out. They're currently 30 meters above ground level. This whole building is still not entirely stable, so they've got to get those out.
So, doesn't matter where I got that clip to, because it's from BBC. He's claiming he's on top of the building, but that's the actual building to his left. Now, do you need more information to prove he's not in that building? Well, there's some, I can't... You shouldn't need it. The question is, why is he doing something like that? Why is the other one I showed you earlier doing something like that? UK's Sharma says the Constipated Party 26, progress being made. They still got mountains to climb. Give us their 131 trillion and get lost. Young Canadian, so that's the theme now. Instead of the hardcore, they got to put them in gulag camps. Their houses should be burned down. They got these pacifist children. They're targeting our children now. There's no resistance, so now they're just going for the children, see? Young Canadian climate activists call on leaders to do more. They got me censored. The whole show, I haven't hit 20 people on my show. That I've been doing for over a decade. I can't get 20 people on my show. If I was wrapping shit on the stick to make fertilizer, there'd be like 30,000 here yucking it up, telling shitty jokes, right? No pun intended. So now they got children. We see this over and over and over for 10 days now. Canadian kids. They're not even children, they're kids. They're keeping a close eye on the world leaders as if they know the difference. They can't articulate what's on TV that night or what they had for supper last night, but they're the arbiters. You chicken neck Congress never hold the nuclear industry accountable. Now you got the planet destroyed. Young kids attending the conference are learning about climate, well, you need to learn about it before you go there. Are learning about climate change and trying to put pressure on the world leaders to make real promises. So they're trying to get the New World Order to do exactly what the New World Order wants to do, but only quicker. My God, man, we've lost the planets to idiots. Conference of Constipation has mountains to climb, with the world still set for 2.4. 2.4! You killed the Pacific Ocean. I showed you the documentation at the beginning of the show. You actually killed the Pacific Ocean. I done the expeditions. It's not a game. Report ranks Australia 54th amongst 60 countries. Australia is the biggest producer, one of the biggest producers of high-grade uranium, which, by the way, was the same uranium for Fukushima nuclear meltdown that killed the Pacific and the Atlantic now, and all the species. We couldn't even find last year a flock of birds, this year rather, or last year or the year before, on the East Coast. No flocks of birds, no fish jumping in the ponds, hundreds and hundreds of ponds. There's no insects or no ants in the ant hills. I've checked hunters this year, going across in the wilderness for 450 kilometers away from base, out in the middle of nowhere, camped out with the quad and that. And then no spiders in the woods. This is absurd. This is there's no room for nuclear. And they're being very careful not to use nuclear. In a major embarrassment for the Australian government, the UN, the New World Order, Climate Summit awarded 54th position out of 60. Australia's lunatic anyway, right? The government, the industry. Halfway through the conference, Constipation, where do climate negotiations stands? It's not negotiations, this is armed robbery. It's a stick-up. They're trying to rob us of our futures, and they got away with it. There's no opposition whatsoever. And not even opposition here. 22 people on my show. Striking a deal between nearly 200 countries that signed the Paris Agreement is daunting. 200 countries. So Friday is the last day, and I'm going to do a real show on Friday. Hopefully I get 23 people on my show or so. I know, I'm thinking big now. I'm a big shot now if I get 23 people on my show. Conference of Parties, 26 witnesses 4 groundbreaking missions to accelerate decarbonization. At least 250 billion will be invested this decade in clean energy innovation, which is they're trying to get the United Nations or the European, whatever you want to call that mess they got over there, to call nuclear green and carbon free. If you do that, then it's considered clean energy. The problem is, like last year, the world put up 300 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies. And nuclear was 0.4 gigawatts or something, versus 261 gigawatts for renewables. So nuclear can't compete with renewables. But if you actually use compressed air storage, like I showed you earlier, and pumped hydro, for instance, goodbye coal, oil, gas, and nuclear. But they don't want to do that. They want to do what they want to do. They need reactors for their stupid death machine known as nuclear. Net zero industry emissions. Hard to abate sectors like steel, cement, chemicals make up a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions. Makes up a quarter. So this is how the brainwashing works anyway. The greenhouse is not gas is going to heat up the planet. This is absurd to call it greenhouse. Radioactive fallout is your greenhouse gas. It's been going on for 75 years straight. 75 years. 75 years of pulsing energy every second. This is Fukushima's plume. All the nuclear testing was nuclear wars. The same bombs, the same radioactive fallout. New mission comes after a report by the International Atomic Energy Agency net zero by 2050, which is the new mission. The new mission came after a report by United Nations subsidy, the International Atomic Energy Agency. It was created by an anonymous group and then started reporting to the Security Council in the United Nations, and has always done that for over 70 years, which means that's United Nations. See? According to the Global Innovation Needs Assessment supported by the UK government and Climate Works Foundation, 2.7 trillion per year could be saved by utilizing methods laid out in mission innovation announcements are contributed to by such energy innovations and have potential to unlock low carbon value chains worth 1.5 trillion in gross. More than halfway through the Constipated Party, world leaders accused of delivering empty promises on a sinking ship. So these world leaders, this United Nations, bizarre, incredibly dangerous. Just hang on one second there. Whatever. Conference of Parties. Constipated Parties, I guess is what they're calling it now. Jeremy Corbyn hits out at Constipated Parties greenwashing. The McCarthy family is about the only one that makes any sense. They say everybody should turn to a plant-based diet. Adopt a plant-based treaty to avert climate catastrophe. No, it was just avoid being cruel to all the species, I think is more appropriate way to... That's him and his two daughters. He can't be too young. I used to listen to him when I was really young on the old 8-tracks. I think we were the first boat on the coastline to have an music on a boat. We had an 8-track on our boat. And shitty speakers, and it was just magic. And times had changed. You knew times had changed. You had music on a boat. Never heard of before that. Radioactive waste cleanup against the Port Granby project site. So every amount of radiation exposure increases your risk of cancer. This is a story we covered last night. And so the buried radiation, they were supposed to move it away from Lake Ontario. And so it's 700 meters back from Lake Ontario. And it's surrounded by farms. And all they done was buried it in the ground. The whole story is bizarre. They buried it in the ground. There's about 1,000 kinds of fission products you got to worry about coming out of the ground. Inhaling just one hot particle causes cancer. So putting it in farmland where you know it's going to... It's just absurd. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. Japan refutes the World Health Organization's Fukushima cancer finding. So I'm behind on nuclear because of this conference of parties and everything else, by over 2,000 headlines. And what I mean by that is I got to challenge at least the 2,000 headlines that I gathered up on nuclear in the last little while. In 2012, the Japanese National Cancer Center said the number of patients rose by 865,000 a year after Fukushima. It was the worst number since World War II. But move ahead 9 years, and Japan refutes the World Health Organization's Fukushima cancer findings. By the way, Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates now nearly double. So if you got friends where they gain a lot of weight in just a year or two, that's radiation. That's caused by radiation in your brain, changing your metabolism. It's the same as radiation in your thyroid gland. You got mutated stem cells or mutated hormones going out. That's what the gland does. It converts it to hormones. So obesity rates now nearly double Japan's average. Excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Pneumonia cases surge in Japan because it causes lung issues, respiratory problems, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Japan Times column is the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. The truth will come out about Fukushima nuclear meltdown. So you can't have the public worldwide without all the species getting brutally affected too. Fallout could have affected the whole world. Gee, I don't know. Let's look at the models. You think that affected the whole world, the radioactive fallout? I don't know. Former top International Atomic Energy Agent official. Actually, Fukushima is a catastrophe for every citizen of the world. Oh, yeah. No kidding, Batman. Fukushima fallout is global warming. That's the plutonium-239 models from Fukushima's numbers. This is the xenon-133 models from TEPCO's numbers. This was I shot this video coming up on Friday night after Friday night show. It's the first time I used the new gimbal, so I just want you to see the gimbal in action. This is out my back door. But you notice how the gimbal, how the camera now has this uniqueness to it, right? I'm still waiting for a couple of more pieces to come in for the gimbal. I'm learning how to use it. It's a big process, eh? It takes a couple of months to figure these things out to get good. I was in the woods today with it too, by the way. I took that Friday night, right after the show. That's right, baby. Turn it down for you. Right, Robert. Ted Richards. Jesus. The Invisible Rabbit. This is day 10. Ted Richards. Good night, everybody. The Mutant Botanical Garden. Adrian Johnson. Yeah, like if you like the articles, I show you the headlines, because otherwise I can't fit everything into the description. It's like I'm worked to death already. So all you gotta do is type in any headline you want to go read. You go read the academic study or the headline or something like that. James Lucet, good night, buddy. Have a great one. Cough mixture. Cough mixture. Oh, I get it. Cough mixture. Very clever. Dennis Jenkins. Ooh. Yeah, I don't care enough about the list every day. That would take hours for me each day. It takes the entire day to make these presentations and then go ahead and do them. It's actually it's 12:30 at night my time. It's midnight, after midnight, 12:30 my time. I'm doing my shows late to accommodate the West Coast and that. James Ward. Now don't worry about the nuclear water release, James. They're already done it. The tanks are actually empty because the radiation's so high. If you fill up the tanks, you couldn't build another tank on the site. Go back through my videos and type in tanks. There's a couple of presentations. Some are better than others, but they're all good. I've done many presentations about the tanks already in the last couple of months with this new site. My other site had 1,600 presentations on it, and they took that down while I was on a research expedition doing species counts a couple of months ago. I was 450 kilometers away out in the woods, and they took my site down. No emails, no strikes, just get lost, Dina. Good night, Chad. Parole, Colette S. Darlene. Sandra Churchill. Good night, everybody. James Lucid again there. New World Order. Ooh. Did we get everybody? Wow, I got censored brutal tonight, didn't I? 18 people on the show, 27 thumbs up, 25 votes. 88% says George Bush is right. Like, how can you vote no when I showed the video at the beginning? How does that work? I'm going to end that poll right as we speak here. Where are you two, Dana? I don't know. Right there. So we're going to end that poll. Goodbye, poll. So we only got 3 days to go. Get back to nuclear. The problem is nuclear is global warming. Nuclear is climate change. Nuclear is all the illnesses. Nuclear is COVID. And I had done 50 presentations, by the way, on coronavirus. And so I earned the right to have a conversation, but YouTube gave me a strike for doing it on my new site. Because YouTube is now United Nations. It's hard to believe I've done all that work and I couldn't even get 20 people in my show. And I work like a dog all day and I can't get 20 people in my show. After a decade, it's crazy, isn't it? Censorship, it's crazy. Censorship. Top-notch documentation. I go through a lot of work to put together these stupid pictures and turn them into little works of art. And there's great music. It's a real party. And so the nuclear industry is terrified because you're here. They're terrified that you might do what I'm doing. They're terrified. That's why they call them cowards. The despicable, disgusting, coward industry. Don't forget that man from United Nations, from IAEA, will sniff your bike seat. So if you're down there in Glasgow, get a paper bag or a plastic bag for your bike seat. He's down there. Catch up. Good night, everybody. Corrupt censorship, yeah. That's all good. Mutant tank botanical. Great night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for day 11. Day 11 of the creepy, disgusting, despicable, coward United Nations and nuclear industry show. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks.
Alle Menschen